Husband abandons me for pregnant girlfriend. It's your fault for being infertile, lol. 5 years later. My son, Mommy, who's this guy? Look, I got my girlfriend pregnant, and I'm gonna divorce you. Now I know better. I never had a fertility problem. I never needed to take a test. You were the one that had all the problems, and I was never at fault. I deserve children, and because I got my new girl pregnant, I can finally be happy. My husband suddenly confronted me with divorce documents. I was so surprised at the suddenness of it all that I couldn't close my mouth. I was sure I looked like a grouper. Seeing me in such a shocked, speechless state, his face morphed into an expression of proud triumph as he pushed the documents closer towards me. But what surprised me was not the truth that he was having an affair. I actually couldn't believe that he got a woman pregnant. And that was because I knew the truth. This is the story of how my husband acted extremely unfairly ever since evidence of my fertility problems, and how his own cognitive dissonance caused such a ruckus years after we both moved on from each other, and how he got the punishment he deserved for being such a dickhead. My name is Tina, and I'm currently married to my second husband, Calvin. We have a son together, named Morrison, and we have another child on the way. Before that, I was married to a man named Will, and he was my husband for 3 years. We never had any children during our time together, both of us wanting children notwithstanding. It seemed that no matter how we tried, we just couldn't seem to conceive. We started trying to have a baby right after we got married, but even after 3 years, it never happened yet. I thought that maybe I was the cause, and decided to discuss going to the hospital with Will. Hey honey, we're still childless even after 3 years of trying. I'm getting worried something's wrong, so why don't we go take a fertility test? Just to see how we are, you know? Fertility test? What are you saying, that I'm the problem? I'm the reason why we can't seem to have children? No, I'm just saying that I'm convinced I'm the problem, but we won't know until we get it checked out, right? If you're convinced you're the problem, then why don't you go take the test first? I'll only do it if they scientifically prove you're not the problem, which I personally doubt is the case. If it's not caused by me, then we'll have to go through this discussion twice. And I'm sure it's going to be a hassle for you too. So please come with me. It took me quite a while to convince Will to come to the hospital with me, and in the end he reluctantly agreed and tagged along. His demeanor in the car and in the waiting room was more than enough to make me understand he was not happy about this though. And even at the hospital he kept on saying that he wasn't the cause of the problem, even in front of the doctors. After a month of various fertility tests, we went to the hospital together for the final time to hear the results. Dr. Holt started off by telling us my test results. Mrs. Didion, I'm afraid it's not great news. You seem to have an environment that makes it difficult for you to conceive. Devastated, I asked Dr. Holt about the details, and she told me this difficulty in conceiving was because I had apparently been suffering from a disease called endometriosis for a long time. I had never been examined at a hospital before, but as a result of these particular tests, it was found that I had such a condition. Endometriosis turns out to be a disease in which tissue similar to the lining of the uterus grows outside the uterus, and while I didn't experience any pelvic pain, which is one of its signature symptoms, it can cause great interference in getting pregnant. I was so shocked to find out that the cause of our bad luck was me that I broke down in tears. Just as Dr. Holt was about to comfort me, Will stood up from his chair with a jolt. I fricking knew it was you! I can't believe you doubted me! He suddenly shouted as he tried to leave the hospital room. Please, wait! We haven't given you the results of your tests yet, Mr. Didion. Why the hell should you tell me? The cause of our bad luck is because of her, isn't it? Then it's none of my damn business. That's what he said as he walked out in a huff. I tried to go after him, but Dr. Holt stopped me. At least one person should hear the results of your husband's tests. She told me that Will was also infertile, and if anything, he was less likely to have children than I was. He was diagnosed with 2 things, the more crucial being what's called hyperprolactinemia, which is the overproduction of a hormone called prolactin, which increases testosterone and sperm production, made by the pituitary gland. Too much prolactin can cause male infertility due to poor or no sperm production. The second thing they found was something known as varicocele, and excuse my language here, but refers to the enlargement of veins in the scrotum. Larger veins disrupt the blood flow in the testicle and cause an increase in temperature, which negatively affects sperm production. That was a mouthful, I know, but the point being, Will had little to no chance of ever having children. People tend to think that infertility is generally caused by women, but about 40% of infertility cases are caused by men. Although you have been diagnosed with endometriosis, Mrs. Didion, there are still many chances if you undergo treatment, which oftentimes cures the disease to near total annihilation. I suggest you have a thorough discussion with your husband, and let's work together to cure the problems. I felt a little lighter now that I knew that it was not only me, but also my husband who contributed to the problem, and that we could treat it together. When I returned home, Will was already home, and when he saw my face, he started yelling at me. "I freaking knew you were a failure. It was just as I thought. Will, please, let's calm down and talk about it." I tried to calm him down, but he wouldn't stop. "If you're the freaking cause, it means I had nothing to do with our problem. Why did I have to marry such a failure? As long as I'm with you, I'll never have any kids. Will, you need to listen. Just because it's hard to have kids doesn't mean it's impossible. And by the way, I tried to tell him about his test results, which he so conveniently dismissed as irrelevant, but he was so fired up all he could think about was cursing me. Hard to have kids? That means it's almost impossible to have some, Tina. You've got to be kidding me. After he said so, he stormed into the bedroom. I followed him, but he said, "I can't sleep with a woman who can't have children. You'll have to sleep in the other room." He shooed me away to sleep in the other room. Since then, my conversations with Will had decreased drastically, and we had been sleeping in separate bedrooms since that day. I still could not give up hope for a child, and I went to the obstetrician alone for treatment of my endometriosis. I know it would be better if he and I had the treatment together, but he has not spoken to me since that day, let alone cooperated with helping us out. I couldn't get him to go to the clinic with me, and I gave up after a while. In addition to that, Will had started to be away from home more often more recently, claiming he had extra work to do, and even on his days off, he was away from home, claiming he had things to do. I knew he wasn't that busy at work in the first place, since his workplace had very employee-friendly policies like 0 extra hours and casual clothes for work, and I eventually began to suspect he was maybe having an affair. But since I could not obtain any evidence, I kept my suspicions to myself. I couldn't hire a detective agency because firstly, I didn't have any foundation to provide them, which would evidently give them more work to do, and thus the cost higher. And secondly, even if they did offer no extra charge for the extra work, it was still too expensive for me. Then one day, Will came home early in a rotten mood. He slammed something on the desk with a loud bang right in front of me and tapped his index finger onto what appeared to be some sort of documents. "Look, I got my girlfriend pregnant and I'm going to divorce you. Now I know better. I never had a fertility problem. I never needed to take a test. You were the one that had all the problems, and I was never at fault. I deserve children, and because I got my new girl pregnant, I can finally be happy." What he put on the desk were divorce documents. I couldn't hide my confusion and shock. I was sure I looked like a grouper. Seeing me in such a shocked, speechless state, his face morphed into an expression of proud triumph as he pushed the documents closer towards me. "I have no use for an infertile failure like you." I wasn't surprised at the truth that he was having an affair, but I rather actually couldn't believe that he got a woman pregnant. And that was because I knew the truth. He had hyperprolactinemia and varicocele, that's right, which made him very infertile. I was surprised by his statement because I thought he was being deceived, but I didn't need to defend someone who had betrayed me, so I decided to agree to the divorce. Will had cursed me a lot up until then, claiming I was solely responsible for our fertility issues, and all this without even asking for his test results. And I couldn't love a man who downright cheated on me. "All right then, let's get a divorce. But you were cheating on me. I'll be allowed to claim alimony. All you care about is money, don't you? I'm the one who made you marry, you piece of shit. It's only natural I should demand alimony myself." "What are you talking about? You're not the only one, I say." I tried to tell him his test results, but yet again he went and ignored me. "I just have to pay you the damn alimony, right? If that's all it takes." And just like that, we had our divorce finalized. The next thing I did was tell my parents-in-law the reason for my divorcing their son. I knew they would never contact me themselves because Will actually hated his parents and his home. The Didion family were nationally famous farmers, and Hank and Allie had also been so kind to me, sending us loads and loads of fruits and vegetables. I wanted to say a proper goodbye to them and thank them for everything they did for me. That's why I called them, and the very next day they raided my house with their son to apologize. Will was not in an apologetic mood, not by a long shot, but my parents-in-law were persistent and forced him to bow down. They then promised to pay the alimony in one lump sum, and with that, my relationship with Will Didion ended completely, once and for all. I honestly felt a lot more relieved than I did sad. If I was going to be thrown away just because of infertility, there was no way I was going to have a happy future with him. I knew I had made the right decision, and I began to look forward to a new chapter of my life. I did wish to get married again, because my desire for children still persisted very strongly. I just wished there was someone out there that would make me happy, for real, this time. And I was right. Fast forward 5 years, and I now have my current husband, Calvin, who's a very kind, gentlemanly guy, with a naturally silly personality and a responsible leader. He holds the position of executive manager at my workplace, and he was my personal mentor as I had some blue instances over the fact the fertility treatment seemed to be hitting the doldrums. Slowly but surely we grew close, and our friendship blossomed into a relationship, and after 14 months, we tied the knot. And much to my extreme joy, I got pregnant a mere 6 months after that. Our son Morrison was turning 4 years old in a few days, and we were expecting a little girl too. I was at a shopping mall one Thursday afternoon. I wanted to get some special chocolate snacks for Morrison's birthday cake, and I'd found some awesome-looking balls of almonds dipped in sweetened chocolate. Perfect for the cake. It was a holiday, and the mall was crowded with many people. I was trying to make my way to the shop where they sold those almond chocolates, when right at that moment, I beheld a familiar figure walking towards me. I had run into my ex-husband, Will Didion, again. He was walking with a child of about 5 years old in his arms, and when he saw me, he approached me with a sly grin. I tried to walk away in the opposite direction. He grabbed me by the shoulder. "Hey Tina, it's been a long time. Say hello to my son Gideon. But where are my manners? I know an infertile woman like you will never be able to have a child like I did." And he had a look of triumph on his face. I knew I would only be wasting my time dealing with such a scumbag, so I merely gave a nod of the head, ignored him as he started to talk again, and tried to walk away in the opposite direction. Hey, come on now. You can't ignore me just because you lost the war. Don't set a bad example for my son, Tina, come on. I turned to my ex-husband, determined to let him have my wrath, when at that instant I felt my hand become warm. "Mama!" A boy came running and grabbed my hand. It was my darling son, Morrison. Will started laughing. "Did you marry a single father because you can't have any children? Is that what you did? Or are you using one of those controversial rent-a-child things?" He was making fun of me in public. Then Calvin came up behind me and rested his hand on my shoulder. "Who is this?" He asked me who Will Didion was, and I told him the truth. "This is Will Didion, honey, the ex-husband I told you about?" Will laughed for a brief moment before looking at Calvin with a more appropriate expression on his face and said, "How do you do?" Calvin greeted him back. Didion then took turns looking at me, then Calvin, then me again. He finally turned to Calvin and said with a large, wry grin on his face, "How could you marry such an infertile failure, dude? You have quite the strange fetish, I gotta say. Is this the child you had with your ex-wife? Listen, bro, I'll let you in on a secret. She's using you because she's infertile. If you don't get rid of this piece of work, I swear, you'll never live a happy life. Trust me on this." And why would I trust a stranger more than I trust my own wife? You seem to have misunderstood something, sir. This child is named Morrison, and Tina gave birth to him. Will looked utterly incredulous. "You don't have to lie, my good man. I know she's infertile. I saw the proof with my own eyes." "I'm not lying, Didion. Morrison is my son, and it's Calvin's too." I showed him Morrison's birth certificate to prove that I wasn't lying. And when I told him that I had another child in my belly, he started to get really upset. It can't be. That can't be true. When she was married to me, she was told she couldn't have any kids. Ever. He was started a commotion in the middle of a bustling shopping mall, so I decided to explain to him calmly. Think back 5 years. When did Dr. Holt ever say I would never have any children? You stormed out of the office before he could explain the treatment, and that's exactly what I've been doing for the past 5 years. I'm sure you've heard this too, but just because it's hard to have kids doesn't mean you can't have kids. As I mentioned, I had continued my therapy since I divorced Will, and over time the disease was cured had improved my condition a bit. A little more than a year after I divorced him, I got married to Calvin, and although my condition had improved, I was told by Dr. Holt, who continues to be my OB/GYN to this day, by the way, that I could not have children right away, and I told Calvin that it was going to be difficult for me to have children. As you know, unlike Will, however, he was very supportive by going to the hospital with me and taking care of my diet. Thanks to his active efforts in my treatment, we were able to conceive with the span of 6 months. My pessimism made me think I would never be able to have any children, but I did. There is a difference between infertility and difficulty in conceiving a child, Will. You just refuse to acknowledge it, I said to him, and he started to get even more upset, and I put the final nail in the coffin. We never went over your test results then, did we? I've tried to tell you several times since then, but you just wouldn't listen. I know it's 5 years late, but I'll tell you your results now. You were diagnosed with hyperprolactinemia and varicocele, and it was scientifically proven that you were less fertile than I was. That's a lie. That's totally not true, because I have a child, Tina. I have Gideon here. My ex-husband started shaking as he looked at his son. I mean, you're my boy, aren't you? The boy in his arms didn't seem to know what he was talking about. This was not the kind of story I wanted my own son to hear, so I finished with, "We're very happy together right now. If you're happy too, that's all that matters." I turned around and was about to leave when someone who must have been Will's current wife showed herself. "Hey, is this my child? Hey, how about it, eh? Answer me." Will took the woman by her shoulders and started shaking her, demanding answers. The woman was clearly upset. Yes, honey, Gideon is your son," was all she said. "Then you won't mind if I take a DNA test, right?" That's when the woman grew increasingly panicked. "Calm down for once, honey. We've been together for 5 years, right? Then, yes, Gideon is your child. Maybe you really were just having a hard time getting your old wife pregnant, and maybe you found the right time to have one with me instead. I don't know." Even when she told him that, he wouldn't stop his tantrum. He forgot that he was in public and started raging. "We haven't been able to have any children since then. And you, Tina, even if you had been getting treatment, you're already pregnant with a second child. It's not right. It's not right, I say. It's not fricking right," Will shouted and cried more and more vigorously. Gideon was starting to get frightened by the sight of his father having such a fit. I didn't want anything to do with it anymore, and I knew it would make my husband and son feel uncomfortable, so I tried to leave once again. Then Will quickly gets up and says, "You destroyed my family, which I now used to think was happy," and walked straight towards me, arms outstretched. I was so scared that I was about to leave with my son in my arms. That's when I heard a loud smack and a dull voice that sounded like Will was in pain. I looked back to find him on his back, Calvin towering over him. My husband had thrown Will right on his back with a powerful judo throw. Now, I don't think it is right to blame my wife for your misfortune, my good man. You betrayed my wife, and while I can understand her being angry at you, you have no damn right to be angry. Calvin has a black belt in judo, and it was easy for him to throw Will, who had never trained for anything, onto the floor. Will, who couldn't even breathe a word because Calvin was right, or maybe it was because he had the air knocked out of his lungs, lay motionless and crying on the floor. Why is this happening? Why is this happening to me? Why? Why, you ask? Well, because you betrayed me, right? Well, sure, you did betray me. But because of that, I've never been as happy as I am now. I really ought to thank you for giving me the life I've always wanted. My son is not my son. You betrayed me to go over there. So take good care of your family, okay? Your child is completely innocent in this. With that as my parting shot, I left. Calvin behind me, Morrison in my arms. Behind me, I could hear Will and his wife arguing, but not once did we look back. Since then, Will has called me several times. I once answered the phone by accident, and this was what he had to say. I divorced that bitch. I did a DNA test and found out Gideon was never my son. You already have a child. Even if it's not mine, I know I would be able to love your kids with all my heart. Besides, I'd love to have another child, so maybe we can have a family of 5. Wouldn't that be amazing? I had another fertility test the other day. They said it's not that I'm completely infertile, it's just that I'm going to have trouble having kids. So why don't we work on it and have our child together? That's exactly what I wanted to hear 5 years ago, when we were both diagnosed with ISIS, Will. Now is the worst possible time to tell me this. I'm so happy now with Calvin, with Morrison, and with our darling Adrian due in a couple of months. I would never betray my family for a traitor like you. You've got to be kidding me! Well then, looks like I don't another choice. I'm coming over to your house right now. I followed you guys when you went home from the shopping mall the other day. I know where you live. That's what he said, threatening me. I hung up the phone and called the police just in case. Then, Will really did come to the house and banged on the front door for 15 minutes straight. He was eventually taken away by the police who arrived at the scene. A few days later, my old in-laws, the Didions, contacted me to apologize for what had happened. My ex-parents-in-law brought their son to my house. Why do I have to apologize? I'm sleepless and miserable, and she's fricking happy. It's not right. He didn't seem convinced he should apologize, but Mr. Didion pushed the bastard's head towards the ground and made him get down on his knees. I'm really sorry that my foolish son caused you trouble not once, but twice, dear Tina. From now on, we'll keep an eye on this son of a bitch so that he won't bother you and your family anymore. They also said that they were going to drag him back home to help on his family's farm, and he's going to quit his job to go back to the countryside. I mentioned the Didions are nationally famous, and that's because they have been in the farming industry for generations, and they grow a large variety of crops, all of which are of excellent quality, and all of it is organic. They therefore don't have a day off throughout the year. Will is from the countryside, and he has always been embarrassed by his family's accent, which I found quite endearing myself, to be honest. So he moved to another city after graduating college instead of following in their footsteps. So going back to the countryside was legit hell for him, but he deserved it. Please, if we get back together again, I won't have to go back to the country. Even after everything he's done, he was still clinging to me. And I had a husband, son, and expected daughter to worry about. Mr. Didion beat his son in the side of the head with a gigantic punch. And how many goddamn times do you have to bother dear Tina, you rotten hunk of beef shit? Twice is already far too much. Don't you dare think you can do it again, because you don't want to make me angry, boy. Now, away with you. You have crate hauling waiting for you back home. He yelled at me and took Will away. Since then, my family has lived happily ever after. And next week is hopefully when Adrienne will bless us with her cries. We will be a family of 4 from now on, and I'm going to cherish this happiness in my life as much as is humanly possible.